Thank you very much. And I call on Joan McAlpine to be followed by Donald Cameron. Joan McAlpine.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to be able to speak in this debate of the Continuity Bill in advance of Stage 2 today, particularly as a number of developments have taken place since we last debated the bill last week. The Minister has said that UK ministers met with the Scottish and Welsh governments but failed to reach agreement again. The UK Government has tabled its own amendments in the House of Lords, as we've heard. The Scottish Government has offered compromise, and the UK Government has published its list of proposed devolved frameworks. There's also, quite out of the blue, a new list of powers, such as on state aid and procurement, which the UK Government claim is reserved, and the devolved government's dispute. That underlines the need for this continuity bill we debate today, and therefore my speech today will focus on the need for these frameworks, that is, frameworks which are democratically agreed and not imposed on Scotland and Wales. Take back control was described by some as an attack on elites. Indeed, it became the terrorist chant of the Brexiteer ultras. But in a supreme irony, the UK-EU Withdrawal Bill hands control not to the people, but to one of the most elite groups within the UK, Tory ministers. The ultras demand an end of all constraints, legal, political, or even international, which could limit UK ministers, except by a UK Parliament, which can never adequately represent the people of Scotland. Scotland has just 59 seats out of 650 in the Westminster Parliament. It can never represent us adequately. And yet here we see Westminster grabbing powers from a Parliament which has 100% representation from Scotland. Yes.
Yeah, beacon of consistency, in that she would say that this Parliament should not cede powers to ministers.
Joan McAlpine.
Well, I think the Minister has made it very clear that he's listening to what the opposition. The Minister has made it very clear. Yeah, the Minister has made it very clear that he is listening, and these amendments will be debated later in the Finance and Constitution Committee.
Adam Tompkins.
Yes.
Could the member just indicate which amendments she thinks the Finance and Constitution Committee should accept this evening?
Joan McAlpine.
Well, I'm not going to preempt the Finance and Constitution Committee. I don't sit on the Finance and Constitution Committee, and therefore I think that would be very, very inappropriate. I touched on the theme last week in my speech on the contrasting operation of the EU single market with the system as yet undefined UK ministers want to impose on us. The rules and regulations of the single market are created under leadership of commissioners appointed by democratically elected member state governments and agreed by those governments within the Council and the members of the European Parliament. They are enforced by a series of agencies and the Court of Justice of the European Union, mechanisms that we will leave in 12 months' time. What will replace legally enforceable checks and balances across the UK once we leave the single market? Professor Michael Keating, one of the experts in this area, has already said it's not at all clear, and I would contend that UK ministers clearly plan further centralisation and the triumph of their will, and yesterday's amendments tabled to the House of Lords by the UK Government confirm this. They set out that UK ministers would only be under a duty to consult the devolved administrations and provide information to the UK Parliament on the effect of the regulations and the consultation it took from those devolved administrations. That is not agreement. It is therefore unacceptable and reverses the devolution settlement that 74% of Scots voted for in 1997. The UK Government's actions since 2016 show that their idea of consultation, never mind agreement, is deeply flawed. They cannot be trusted to treat the devolved administrations with respect. That lack of respect, which has coloured the entire GMC-EN process around Brexit, was on display again last week with the publication of by the UK Government of the analysis of the devolved frameworks. The Minister says that neither he nor his Welsh counterpart were consulted on the list that was published, and that's not the respect agenda. Of course, we need frameworks, but they must be meaningful. They must be arrived at through mutual consent. There are serious, real dangers in the material published on Friday, not least the surprise news that the UK are insisting that rules around procurement and state aid are, in their view, reserved. Given the very different political direction between Scotland and the UK for many years on these issues, it's a very real and deep concern. Do we really want to see this right-wing or future right-wing UK governments interfering in what support Scottish governments give to Scottish businesses to protect Scottish jobs? Without agreement, there is no guarantee that the UK will give us the power to protect standards, or whether we will be forced to lower them to match whatever trade deal Liam Fox agrees to. The EU single market has not been without controversy, but the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality were built into the treaties of the EU to protect the powers of parliaments like this. Subsidiarity in particular is pertinent as it illustrates the difference between what we have now and what we could have if we do not gain the guarantees we need. The Law Society brief for this bill describes it as aiming to ensure that decisions are taken as closely as possible to the citizen and that constant checks are made to verify that action at EU level is justified in the light of the possibilities available at national, regional and local level. Nothing like this exists in the devolution settlement. The EU is an organisation that pools sovereignty from independent member states to give them greater influence on their shared values. As shown by the UK government's actions in the last 24 hours, their ideas are very different. We will be consulted only, and despite being assured of a power bonanza, we find out that the principles under which this Parliament was founded will be undermined. Whose sovereignty did the Brexiteers mean when they spoke of taking back control? It appears parliamentary sovereignty applies to Westminster, to the House of Commons, but not to this chamber. We as MSPs are simply in the way, an annoyance to be ignored or trampled over on the way to Brexit. I am shocked and disappointed, but frankly not surprised.